What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you guys go ahead and do so because this build's about to get big. We're ditching the Dana 30 and 35 setup because they're not going to hold up to what we're going to put this Jeep through, and that means we are starting the 1-ton swap and 1-ton build series. So we're going to go ahead and start tearing down these axles, seeing what we're working with, making sure everything's good before we order a bunch of parts for it, get everything set up, cleaned up. We're going to start with the front axle today, then possibly the back if we have time. The reason I'm starting with the front is because it consists of a lot more. It's got the steering components and all of that. And I want to go ahead and build the front axle first because it'll take the most time. So we're going to go ahead and get the front torn apart. So this is a 2005 Dana 60 out of a Super Duty. So I've already gone ahead and torn some of it apart and started to clean up a little bit of the housing, as you guys can see. But for today, to make it a little bit lighter and easier to move around the garage, we're going to go ahead and take out the carrier, ring gear, pinion, all that stuff. Then we'll go ahead and start cleaning it up and putting it all back together. It's going to be a lot more work putting it together. So let's go ahead and get this thing torn apart so we can get to that. Then we'll work on the back axle. That one should take a lot less time, honestly. So we're going to go ahead and start with the front. Got to replace the knuckles, so I got to take those off, clean up all the housing, repaint everything, weld the truss on. So I've gone ahead and taken all the diff cover bolts off. It's important to keep all this stuff organized when you're doing this, so that way you don't lose any of the parts. Already lost one of the bolts. But after taking the cover off, everything looks fairly good, honestly. There's a little bit of like grime and sludge and stuff all over the place. But after the first look, it doesn't really look like any of the teeth are messed up, which doesn't really matter to us either way because we're not reusing these gears. But everything looks like it's in good shape, and that's a good sign because we did buy this axle already. But let's go ahead and get this taken out. I got to take the two bearing caps off. Then we'll get everything taken out. We'll look over everything. Make sure there's no major issues. I'm not expecting this thing to be perfect because it's from a 2005. Who knows how many miles are on it. We just need the housing, and we're replacing literally everything else. We'll do the same for the back axle later. But for now, let's go ahead and get this carrier and ring gear removed. Alright, so they're both off. One thing to keep in mind, if you're going to reuse these, you're going to want to make sure you keep them on the left and right side. That way you don't get them all mixed up because they are kind of important to be on the right side. So make sure you guys keep those organized. I'll probably replace them, but for now they're organized. Also, another thing, if you're going to reuse these gears, you're going to want to be a little careful removing this so you don't mess anything up. For me, I'm replacing all this stuff anyway, so it's not a huge deal. But I would like to keep them as intact as I can, just so I can see what was wrong with this axle, if anything. And also, if you're going to reuse the gears, I would recommend still replacing all the bearings and seals and everything in the axle. With an axle like this, you never know how many miles are on it or anything, so you're just going to want to make sure you go ahead and replace all that stuff that commonly fails. That way you don't have to go back and do it when it's underneath of the Jeep. So let's go ahead and get this carrier removed. So before I got it out, I was actually just spinning it around, and there's a ton of this like grime stuff, or like, I don't even know what it is, honestly, but there's a ton of this stuff in here. And none of the teeth look broken that I can see. It's kind of hard to see down into the pinion, but it looks like it's intact. It's harder to see on camera than it is in person, but everything looks decent. So I'm not sure what that is. I'm not too concerned about it since we're replacing all this, and we just need the housing to be in good shape. The spider gears all look good. So I'm going to go ahead, remove the carrier, the ring gear, all that stuff, and we'll take a better look once it's outside of the axle. It'll be a lot easier to see everything. Now I am replacing these gears, that's why I'm not too concerned. We're going to run bigger tires than the Wrangler has on these axles, so we definitely need the right gear ratio so that the little 4.0 can spin these tires efficiently. So we're going to go ahead and swap out the gears while we have everything apart anyway. Alright, so we got most of it out. Pinion's still in there, just got to flip the axle around and take off the nut on the back and pop that out. But everything looks fairly clean. There's a little bit of like surface rust here, which shouldn't be a huge issue. This side's super clean actually. Seals are still in there. This is your inner axle seal if you guys haven't seen those. If you guys haven't seen those, now you realize why you have to take everything apart to get to them. They're in a terrible spot to replace, and they're also a pretty common failure point, honestly, for these things. So I'm going to go ahead and replace those, obviously. Pinion, spinning around looks fine. There's no chips or cracked teeth or anything like that I can see. So honestly, these gears are in pretty good shape. You could reuse them if you really wanted to. However, I'm not. Now this thing is going to need a lot of cleaning, and unfortunately I've run out of brake cleaner. So if you guys, a little pro tip after doing a few of these is you're going to go ahead and want to pick up a ton of brake cleaner. It's like the most helpful thing you can possibly get. I had to go pick up more because I only had one, or like I had like a quarter of this can left when I started this. So definitely a big tip would be picking up a ton of that before you start this project, because you're definitely going to need it and you can never have too much of it. Alright, so I got this all set up here on the vise, and I'm just kind of giving it a quick overlook just out of curiosity what's wrong with it or if there's anything wrong with it, and it looks fine. You could honestly reuse these. If you wanted to swap them out and use this carrier, you would just take the ring gear bolts off and pop it off. There's a couple tips there that you would need to do to get that ring gear back on because it's super tight fit, but spider gears all look fine. Everything honestly is in really good shape. This axle you could probably bolt back up and it would work perfectly fine. Nothing seems to be broken, and nothing was broken on all the other parts that I removed a few months ago. Everything looked like it was in pretty good shape, so this axle didn't seem to have any issues. Now, I'm not even going to take this gear off just because we're going to get a whole new carrier and everything, because we're going to be doing an air locker in the front, because I like how easy it is to just flip a switch and you're locked, and then be able to turn them off super easily as well. So we're going to go ahead and just replace all of that after I clean everything up and get the knuckles off. We'll get new knuckles, all that stuff for this Jeep, but it's kind of cool to see that this is still in pretty good shape after probably a ton of miles on it. I don't really know how many were on this, but it's more than likely a ton. Now, this thing is massive compared to the factory axles. This is going to be way, way wider. I'm sure you guys have seen a bunch of 1-ton swaps. It's going to be a lot bigger. Everything's beefier, and that's the main reason you're going to want to do this swap if you're planning on running bigger tires and everything. I did actually want to go ahead and show you guys, like, the only thing I have to compare to is some spider gears out of a WJ, so let me grab those. Alright, so here's a spider gear out of a WJ. It's a little chewed up, but here is the difference. So as you guys can see, the 1-ton spider gear is massive. That's kind of like the only gear I have from a WJ in the garage that I can show you guys comparison. It's not the best comparison, but you guys can see how much bigger everything is. I mean, everything's scaled up the same amount. And that's what makes these axles so desirable under a rock crawler build. It's just they're a lot bigger, a lot beefier, and a lot stronger. Now, if you guys didn't follow along back when I bought these, I'll give you guys like a quick overview. We bought them for $800 for the pair. They're going under the blue WJ. We're going to 1-ton swap that Jeep. I'm going to document this whole process so that way you guys can see how to do it yourself, see how much work goes into it, and see if you really want to do it. We're also going to be doing the same for a Wrangler axle swap, but this is a ton of work to do, so that's definitely one thing to keep in mind. It's not super easy, and it's not bolt-in at all. They're going to be bigger and wider than the Wrangler axles, so you're going to run into issues there, but they're definitely worth the upgrade if you're planning on really beating on your Jeep and really using it to its full potential. Definitely worth the upgrade in my opinion. And this is just a junkyard axle swap video. It'll basically be a tutorial on how to 1-ton swap your WJ, and we're also going to be doing Wrangler axles under the black WJ. We're going to be doing a whole series on that as well, swapping all that over. So if you guys like that content, you guys want to see that, make sure you guys go ahead and subscribe. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.